Chase for the Championship is made possible by our partners, including Kroger. Visit Kroger for all your holiday needs and stock up for college bowl season. R.S. Andrews, Dog Nation's choice for all your heating needs this season. Visit rsandrews.com to see how they can make you smile today. Marlowe's Tavern. Need a tasty gift this holiday season? Try a Marlowe's Tavern gift card. Visit marlowstavern.com to purchase your gift card today. And Georgia Farm Bureau. With experienced and friendly agents all across the great state of Georgia, Georgia Farm Bureau keeps its promises to members. Learn more at gfbinsurance.com. Here are your hosts for Chase for the Championship, Dog Nation's Brandon Adams and John Stinchcomb.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into Chase for the Championship, presented by Kroger, Marlowe's Tavern, R.S. Andrews, and Georgia Farm Bureau. Happy to have all of you with us today as we inch closer to Georgia in the Orange Bowl against the Michigan Wolverines coming up on New Year's Eve. We'll talk to John Stinchcomb about all this here coming up in just a moment. Of course, there is certainly a very interesting time here for UGA when you think about just concluding the start of the early signing period, what we can now kind of think of as National Signing Day in December, whereas that date for a long time was traditionally in February. So much of the work is done on that first day, and obviously Georgia was busy yesterday. And in the midst of all this, you have the bowl game preparations kind of going on there as well. John, we know to be an SEC head coach, you've got to be a tremendous time management person. And in the case of Smart, that is certainly challenging in a huge way when you think about having to manage the recruiting part of this and the ongoing bowl prep at the same time, even for someone like Kirby Smart, who seems to have a boundless level of energy. That is certainly going to be tested during these times, is it not?
Absolutely. It's time management right now. It's amazing how much the coaching staff has going on this time of year. I know with yesterday being National Signing Day, the early signing period, which, what is this, year 5 of that going on, the benefit of playing at the end of the month is for the past couple of weeks, you could focus on really making sure you get the recruits that you want and signing day goes well for you. And then today you can really start switching gears and focusing primarily on Michigan, and you have plenty of time to do so. With the staff the size that they are now, not just of coaches, but of analysts and recruiting coordinators and everyone that's in the building, it allows you to spread the job responsibility across the board. And they've done a phenomenal job of not only getting recruits in the door, but also managing the transitions that have taken place among the staff. And anytime you lose a coordinator, there needs to be a good plan in place, and it seems like Georgia has one right now.
And, of course, the busyness at this time with the recruiting and the bowl prep ongoing reflected in the Kirby Smart press conference that took place on Wednesday, because first series of those questions kind of deal with more of the recruiting part of this and what's going on there with that. And then you kind of get in more into the Orange Bowl stuff after the recruiting questions that kind of been asked. And I really found it kind of interesting that Kirby Smart was certainly asked about some of the open issues related to Georgia, some of the big questions that still seem to be out there. And I don't know that Smart's answers on this necessarily cleared all this up necessarily too much. I want to play some of this for you, John. We'll kind of spend most of our time talking about a little bit of what Smart had to say yesterday regarding some of the big issues facing this program right now. First of all, on the notion of quarterback, the last time you and I spoke during this, we talked about what Smart had said about quarterback in the post-game press conference after the SEC championship, the following day in the Orange Bowl preview press conference. And Smart, throughout all of that, had remained pretty steadfast in that Stetson's kind of his guy right now. And reading between the lines, you're left to conclude that, wow, JT Daniels just doesn't seem to be much of a consideration at all, at least based on what has happened on the field and what Smart has said as of late. Well, yesterday, with another chance to provide more information on that topic, it seems like the Georgia quarterback conversation for now is kind of where it has been. This Kirby Smart from Wednesday. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer all those questions. There's like 3 of them in there, but at the end of the day, I think we have 4 really good quarterbacks in our system. I really feel confident in 4 guys that can play quarterback for us. I continue to say and repeatedly say both those guys are evaluated each and every day. Stetson did some really good things in the Alabama game. He made a couple bonehead plays as well that he has not played and he has not done in the past. just like we reassess every single position, just like I said after the game. We reassess everything by how you practice, what you do, and everything you do. But his feet have been a blessing for us. His ability to run, scramble, make things open, make plays with his feet have been good. He made a couple poor decisions in the last game, but he's not the only one that did that. So we'll continue to evaluate it.
So, John, listen, I fully acknowledge this is a hot topic that's on the mind of many UGA fans, and as someone who does this for a living, it's my job to kind of service that idea, let folks hear the topic they want to hear about. However, I'm also kind of forced to acknowledge that I don't really have a lot left to add on this discussion. Kirby Smart's essentially again this week saying what he said in the past. It frustrates a lot of people. I've been clear myself that I'm fine with whatever decision Smart wants to make. I wish he'd be a little bit more forthcoming about why he's making the decision that he's making. But beyond that, this doesn't really seem to be new information based on what we've had before. This is clearly going to be one of those issues that lingers for many fans, and Smart just kind of seems fine with that. He's certainly not doing anything to reduce the tension around this topic, and his words yesterday serve, I believe, as a reminder about that once again.
Yeah, I think what he's doing is he's positioning himself well in the position group room. I think the quarterbacks want to hear that they have a fighting chance at things. I think anytime you say that there's 4 quarterbacks that you feel confident in, hopefully we'll keep them around longer. In the age of transfer portals, I don't think it's very realistic to think that all 4 guys, now 5 with Gunner having signed, those are all highly capable, highly sought after quarterbacks. I doubt very seriously that all 5 are going to be in that meeting room come August. With that said, it's a 2-part answer, right? The other piece is we're evaluating constantly, but, and that's the big word, right? But Stetson made some good throws. They like what he's doing. They like his ability of creating with his feet from the pocket and third down situation. And I don't foresee that changing. I think he's kind of tired of answering that same question because the answer hasn't changed, and I don't expect it to. Stetson's his guy. All 4 quarterbacks are capable and are given the opportunity to prove themselves in practice. But as of now, Stetson's the horse that they're going to ride going into these games. And for fans, that may not be the answer they want to hear. It's probably not the answer they want to hear, judging by the comments and the social media posts. But that's where the staff's at, and that's where it lands.
The energy around this topic seems to have gone up post-SEC championship game because Georgia didn't win, and anytime any team on a big stage like that doesn't win, there's always going to be just a more intense conversation ongoing after that. A lot of this has been generated by media questions because the fact that while quarterback, I don't think anyone would say was the main reason Georgia lost the game. It was certainly part of the reason that Georgia couldn't keep pace with Alabama once it built that big lead. But the question I'm asking for you, though, John, is, what really is at stake here for Kirby in this decision? I mean, it doesn't seem to be hurting Georgia in recruiting the quarterback position right now. Georgia signed Gunner Stockton yesterday. That's one of the premier prospects in the 2022 class. Georgia seems to be in as good a position as anyone for Arch Manning right now, the number 1 prospect in the 2023 class. These future quarterbacks don't seem all that bothered by the decision that Smart's making, yet that's not the only consideration here. How much does Smart risk if he is perceived to have gotten this quarterback situation wrong at the end of the season? If Georgia doesn't beat Michigan, or if it gets back to Alabama and doesn't play well in that spot there again, there will be, I think, plenty of room to say, hey, did Kirby Smart get this one wrong? What does Smart risk by having those questions asked about him by the end of this season?
Well, I'm going to flip it around, and I say the risk that he has is possibly losing the locker room if he's swayed by the opinions and weight of social media and fans and really media at large. If they're saying, "Guy, you got to make a change," and the team during practice, during meetings, they feel confident that Stetson's their guy, and it's been influenced or forced the hands for the coaches to make a change. Now, with that said, historically, he hadn't played out all that well. You compare Alabama, who's willing to switch quarterbacks twice in really high stages, national championship, SEC championship, and it's cost Georgia. And then Georgia fans are going, why can't we do that? Why can't we make that change when things aren't going our way? And outside of that pick 6, I think there would be more folks willing to rally around Stetson, but that was such a costly play, and against an opponent where the game is played out time and time again in an unfavorable way. I mean, 7 straight games against Alabama where we come out with the L, fans are upset and they want to see a change. And that's one of the main reasons why they're saying, hey, an easy spot to look at is quarterback, which, you know, we all seem to caveat that statement of saying Stetson's not the only guy to blame for that loss in the SEC championship. No kidding, but fans don't really know the roster as well in other positions. So they can't say, well, then maybe we should make these changes at other spots. The easiest place to analyze, the easiest place for fans to point fingers at is that quarterback spot. And we know that the number 2 guy, JT, right now, has played at a very high level, a very capable level when he's gotten his number called. And there's questions and not clarity provided from the coaching staff as to why he's no longer in consideration for at least a rotational role in this offense.
Put you on the spot for a minute, John, and I apologize for doing so. You were obviously a very important leader on your last team at Georgia in 2002, and Georgia had a couple of quarterbacks that year that were playing some. David Green was the starter and playing the majority of the time and having a record-setting career while doing so. DJ Shockley was a clearly talented player in his own right, would eventually win his own SEC championship in 2005. As a team leader, were you ever consulted by one of the coaches about what you thought about quarterback, what the locker room thought about who should be playing between Green and Shockley and how those snaps should be divided? Were you ever asked about that at all?
That's a great question. Absolutely not. I think if we had an issue with it, we could have probably brought it to the coaches, but no, they weren't consulting the players to see, hey, who do you think is best? I mean, this is what they're paid to do and paid really well. Coordinators, position coach, head coach, their job is to evaluate and make sure that the right players are on the field at the right time. And if there was an issue, we could most certainly bring it up to them, but very rarely can I think of an occasion where the coaching staff is going to the players in the locker room, even leaders, and saying, hey, which direction do you think we should go? That just doesn't happen.
Interesting stuff from John Stinchcomb there. It is Chase for the Championship here on the Dog Nation video channel, presented by Kroger and Marlowe's Tavern and R.S. Andrews and Georgia Farm Bureau, getting you ready for the Orange Bowl coming up on New Year's Eve. And obviously, we're talking about everything that's ongoing with Georgia as it continues its preparations for that big game there that day. Smart, maybe not as clear as he could have been regarding the quarterback situation. Maybe that's also true about another topic as well. You know that Dan Lanning is now out as Georgia defensive coordinator. He's now a head coach at Oregon. He is still on hand, though, for the playoffs. He's a part of this coaching team for Georgia, but no longer in his role as defensive coordinator. That now belongs in a co-coordinator situation with Will Muschamp and Glenn Schumann. And it is assumed that that's also going to be true for the 2022 season there as well. However, I don't know that anyone's still quite so sure exactly what's going on with this. Smart was asked on Wednesday also to provide some clarity of, hey, is the Schumann-Muschamp team, is this also going to remain in place for 2022 there as well? And after hearing Kirby answer it, I'm still not quite so sure. This is Kirby on that also on Wednesday. Take a listen.
Yeah, clarification is Muschamp and both Muschamp and Schumann will be co-coordinators. That's what the clarification is. So Lanning's done a tremendous job here. He is by far and away one of the most loyal guys, hardworking guys that I've been around. He's bright. He's energetic. He's a good teacher. He'll do wonderful things at Oregon. I'm so happy for him that he got an opportunity for a job like that. He had several interviews, several opportunities that he was not interested in, some that he was, and it was one that he thought would be a great opportunity. So I'm glad he's staying on with us to help us finish this thing out. He's done a great job.
John, there's a lot to dig into based on what Kirby said there, but to begin with, I am right in assuming that Smart's being intentionally vague about the Schumann-Muschamp role beyond the college football playoff. Presumably this is about, maybe other overtures that either Muschamp or Schumann might still get or contract stuff or whatever else. But Smart's intentionally not answering that question to the full extent that he could. Do you read in the same way there on that, or am I just simply slow in processing what he's actually trying to say?
No, it's a thing of beauty. And as a guy who gets interviewed from time to time, especially on your show, when you're given questions, you can take them whichever direction you want.
That's right.
So you asked talk to us about the defensive coordinators, just like Kirby was. And where does Kirby spend his time? He talks about Dan Lanning. He talks about his commitment to the program, in a situation that he was probably very familiar with when he was the defensive coordinator at Alabama, and speaking about, you're given a number of options, and all of a sudden he's given a 2-minute answer and spent a predominant amount of the time on Coach Lanning and spent very little time on what it looks like as co-coordinators for this defense, finishing out this season and heading into the next one. And there's strategy there. I mean, I think it makes sense in my mind that you can have two coordinators in planning for a game. What do we like? What do we want to go into the game with? What packages? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? How are we going to mitigate certain situations? All those things, it makes a lot of sense to have two guys, probably because they've had a voice in game planning and preparation throughout this entire season. That piece I understand. That piece, I think, having co-coordinators will transition pretty easily, and still having Lanning in the room, just not leading those meetings. I think the question really remains as to what's it look like on game day? Who's making the calls? Who's putting together the packages and progressing throughout the game? I'm sure they'll work with one another, but only one voice is being carried out to the players on game day. And it still remains that same question of, well, what are the implications after this season ends? And I know Coach Smart doesn't want to focus on that. I'm sure it's something that you have to consider. And as you mentioned earlier in this piece, that's what head coaches do. They're jugglers, and you have to be sure to keep all the balls aloft at any given point. And part of that's having a plan that goes into 2022.
So there's a lot for me around this topic, starting with this. Lanning's going to be a part of the playoff, but clearly his attention's divided on something else. And I almost am fine with that. I mean, to me, Georgia can make it through 2 games, a playoff and a national championship, with the defensive coaching staff that it has right now. You don't have to have the same defensive coordinator. There are enough guys who have influence on that defensive game plan as it is. You just simply don't have to have that. You can get through with what you have there right now. But I guess the fact that he's at least not leaving eliminates the potential distraction. He's there. He may be distracted. He's thinking about both jobs at the same time. But the fact that his physical presence remains, I think, eliminates the potential distraction for the team. Do you buy that?
I think it's the perfect scenario given the situation. With Coach Lanning already taking a position as a head coach elsewhere, he cannot have the focus that you need from a coordinator to game plan for Michigan and then the national championship game. What I do like is you keep him on staff, you keep him with the players, you reduce his role and the demand that you have for his time in game planning and setting everything, and you alleviate that from his plate and put it on 2 very capable coaches that have been a part of this process the entire year, and Schumann long before. So their long-running history of working together, I think they have an understanding of how they put together a game plan, what schemes they like. They have a good analysis of the players and pieces that they have available to them heading into this game. But I think you want to keep them around. You want to keep them around for the players. You want to keep them around in the discussion, but you just don't want Coach Lanning to have to dedicate 100% of his effort to just being the coordinator. It's an unrealistic expectation for a guy who just took a head coaching job and is trying to put together a program all the way across the country. So to me, if given this situation, this would have been my ideal scenario heading into this Michigan game is you keep Coach Lanning a part of the staff, you keep him with the players, but then you remove the coordinating duties, let him have a voice in it, but don't put it on his plate solely to try to come up with that game plan heading into this Michigan game.
Also, by way of prediction, traditionally speaking, with bowl games, you have a coordinator's press conference. Bowl games just a little bit more, there's a lot more media involvement in a lead up to a bowl game than there is a regular season game. And that means hearing from coordinators in a way that you don't typically do so during the season. My prediction, John, here is that when a coordinator steps up to speak for Georgia, you don't have two guys speaking into one microphone. You don't have that, typically speaking. My prediction is it'll be that Glenn Schumann that represents the Georgia defense as the coordinator during that press conference. Obviously, I don't know that for a fact. It's just my prediction. But that is kind of my prediction on all of this, and the hope that, Muschamp brings the pedigree. He's got the coaching experience. But this is now time for Glenn Schumann to have an expanded role on this coaching staff, and I believe that he's going to get that. Some of that will be symbolically in press conferences when defensive coordinators do speak. Other parts of that will just be, other symbolic things may be there as well. But I do believe it's time for Schumann to have the expanded role, and I think we'll see evidence of that as soon as next week or 2 weeks from now when Georgia gets into South Florida for the Orange Bowl. I believe that we'll see Schumann speaking during that defensive coordinator's press conference. What do you think about that?
I think it's very possible. It makes sense to me. I don't think Coach Muschamp would be chomping at the bit to speak with media more.
Right.
And Coach Schumann is a young guy who's still carving out a name for himself on a national scale, and it's a great platform to do so. So that makes good sense to me, especially from a media projection perspective. So, yes. Now, again, you get back to game day. It'll be interesting to see how those voices meld into one as it relays, what you want to do, play in and play out. I'm sure you can scheme and discuss approach in between series, but when it comes to bullets are flying and you're in the middle of a series, it'll be really interesting to see who really has the reins on the horses, if you will, play in and play out. And that has not been given, just no light has been shed on that, especially from Coach Smart up to this point. So we'll have to wait and see.
And then one final issue on this topic, and as a former player, I'm curious of your opinion on this. Do you think that the Georgia defensive approach will now be made different in any way because less of Lanning, more of Schumann, more of Muschamp? Clearly Georgia needs to do something different if they're lucky enough to play Alabama again, because what they tried last time didn't work. But beyond that, the potential for a national championship game, the obvious national semifinal game coming up against Michigan, do you expect something that Georgia does defensively to be different than it would have been because you do have different defensive guys kind of at the top of the helm right now?
No, I expect a very similar approach to really the entire regular season. I think what Georgia discovered was they tried to mix some things up against Alabama, admittedly so. They were trying different coverages, different combinations, and personnel in various spots, and it did not play out well for them. The Will Poole role that he was asked to play was to the detriment of the defense. And you hate to single out a guy, but you go back and you watch the film, and that was a change that was costly. I think there was also some various coverages. I'm no defensive back. I don't claim to be, but it's pretty easy to see that there were some schemes where guys were just left open. And to me, that was something that was not typical of this defense the entire season. The execution was always high. Everyone was on the same page. And it allowed them to play at a really high level. I think when you start mixing that up to try to be something that you're not, you get in trouble. And Georgia experienced a little bit of that against Alabama. There are things that every team can do and focus on within their scheme, within their comfort level that they've already shown across 12 games that you can rely on and feel confident in. And I expect the exact same thing from Michigan. It's just a matter of how you throw it out there, the rotation that you use for the various blitzes and dog packages that you have, because they're diverse. But with 3.5 weeks of preparation for this Michigan game, you have plenty of time to make sure everyone's on the same page and get back to the Georgia football that this defense had become known for heading into the SEC championship.
One more to hear from on Kirby Smart, transitioning to Michigan, what that's been like behind the scenes with this Georgia program. Kirby did address that a little bit about how the practices have kind of now evolved as they get ready to fully turn their attention to the maize and blue. This Kirby Smart once again from Wednesday.
As a staff have been working on them for several days now, preparing, getting things ready. We'll start prepping the players for some of that here in the next couple days, and we'll kind of batten down the hatches and start practicing a lot heavier here tomorrow for those guys.
I hear a couple of things there in that, John. The first part of that from Kirby is the idea that the staff has been focused on Michigan for quite some time, and this to me is a real proving ground for your staff. Obviously, your on-field coaches, but your gigantic support staff, the analysts that are crunching film and really diving into tendencies that Georgia doesn't have any reason to know anything about Michigan. For the most part, Michigan has no reason to know anything about Georgia. These are two programs that haven't played since the 1960s. So at the beginning of the year, you wouldn't have really even assumed you'd be playing Michigan. Michigan actually started the year unranked. It was not really one of the teams that you would have had circled as a potential playoff matchup for UGA. That means somebody somewhere is going to do some work quickly. And part of what we see in a playoff matchup like this is which of these two staffs, and some of this is support staff related, which of these two staffs can find that advantage to put talent in the best position to succeed. And over the course of the last few weeks and last few days, certainly, no doubt the Georgia coaching staff, the Georgia support staff, the analysts, no doubt they have been hard at work trying to find any advantage they might be able to point out to these players once these players turn their full attention to Michigan on the practice field here coming up, right?
You've got more time heading into this game than any week that you have. You've got film to base your analysis off of, to base your schemes. Not only are you looking at what they do, you look at what you do. What are your trends? What are they analyzing when they see your team? How do you use that? Michigan's doing the same thing. Every team that has 3.5 weeks of preparation, they're trying to figure out what's the identity. What are the things that this team really likes to do? What are they when they're in crunch time? What's their fallback? What schemes do they like? Offensively, defensively, what are problems personnel-wise that we need to be aware of? And how do we maximize our opportunities? So given that much time with the staffs that both programs have, I mean, not just you think about Coach Muschamp, who originally started the year as quality control analyst. There are so many folks and voices that have time to really delve in. You know, usually you go back maybe 4 games to build a game plan off of. Well, given 3.5 weeks, you're looking at what they've done in the entire season. So you can't really hide parts of your game, your attack plan, by saying we haven't done this in 5 or 6 weeks when your last game was the conference championship and you have to the end of December to prepare. You can fully analyze every game that the team has played, see where they were weak, see the development and the various things and packages that have evolved throughout the season. So there's a lot that goes into these bowl games. And what I appreciate now more than ever is being a part of the college football playoffs. You don't have the distractions of just what normal bowl games have become, because I think we can both attest this time last year, you're talking about which players are even available for the Peach Bowl as we go up against the Cincinnati team that was hungry. That's not something that we're discussing this year, and I'm grateful for it. Now there's a singular focus across most of the coaching staff, with the exception of Coach Lanning, and the entire football team is every goal that, aside from a conference championship, every goal that we set off at the beginning of the year to accomplish, it's still right there in front of us. And that goes for the staff as well. They're still chomping at the bit for the opportunity to hoist that national trophy at the end of the year. And there's only 4 teams that are still capable of saying that is a possibility for them.
I want to finish with this, and this is also kind of something you heard from Smart a moment ago, and I'm always really interested in the things that he says repeatedly. And over the course of the years, an idea that he's repeated a few times is that he doesn't like to use more than a couple of weeks to really focus the players on any one opponent. Clearly, as you said, the coaching staff's going to take every second they can because presumably their attention span on something like this is a little longer, whereas Smart seems to believe that spending more than a couple of weeks working on a specific opponent runs the risk of a tune-out factor or something along those lines, and that's why, as you pointed out a moment ago, there are practices spent sometimes working on yourself, that it is kind of interesting that Smart, clearly has a plan for what he wants to get accomplished. And Smart's belief seems to be that in that 2-week time leading up to the bowl game, that's when you can really dig deep and allow these players to start thinking about who it is they're playing, Michigan, and you don't really want to do it much longer than that. Now, the other challenge here is that bowl games aren't fully business trips in the way that a national championship game might be, where you're essentially flying in, one practice, play the game, and then you come back home. This is a week's worth of activities, and only some of that are actual practices. So the next week of practice, even though it's Christmas week here in Athens, when they start thinking about Michigan, when they start focusing in on that, that's going to be, John, a really important week, because by the time you get down to South Florida, honestly, practice is a little bit of a circus. So getting something done while you're still in Athens is probably going to be pretty imperative for UGA.
Yeah, there's a total different approach as a player from a coach. As a player, there's that checklist that I want to go through before every game. How does the guy I'm going up against, what is his primary pass rush moves? What's he go to in short yardage? What defense can I expect? That's a normal week. And after a while, you start really trying to look for extra things. I think it can slow you down as a player. For coaches, they're talking about scheme, they're talking about approach, all these various things, and you can spend more time in those areas. As a player, I think it's a little bit different. Once you understand and have that game plan for what you want to do going into, how do they take on double teams as an offensive lineman? What coverages do they like as a wide receiver? How does he play certain coverage if I'm a defensive back when against press? All these things you can do in a shorter and normal work week amount of time, which is good, because if you haven't gotten those things ready before you go to the bowl game, before you go to that bowl site for the Georgia team, before they get to Miami, it's a different atmosphere. There's a lot of distractions that you just mentioned that are very different than what you experience on a normal work week during the school year, during the football season. So having that time to get your game plan in place before you get to Miami, and then the last couple of days before you take the field, I think it's very important as a player. And it sounds like this staff is well aware that there is a natural ramp up that players go to and go through in preparation for their matchup in the weekend.
John, excellent stuff. Thanks so much for being with us here today. Obviously, the time to talk about the Michigan Wolverines and the Orange Bowl is now. The college football playoff only a couple of weeks away here. Georgia in the deep preparation for that now, and obviously we'll lean on your expertise as that game gets closer. Thanks for being here on Chase for the championship. Big thanks to all of our sponsors, Kroger, Marlowe's Tavern, Georgia Farm Bureau, and R.S. Andrews there as well. It is certainly going to be a fun time, and John, as I said before, I really appreciate you sharing some of that time with us here today.
Always a good time talking about these dogs.
John, that is indeed true. And for all of you who've joined us here for this today there as well, we appreciate your time there as well. Getting closer. College football playoff on the way. A lot of us enjoying those holiday plans, Christmas and everything else. And then, of course, getting ready to be down in South Florida for the Orange Bowl. And won't that be a lot of fun? We'll have plenty of Dog Nation coverage for you in the days to come. But for now, once again, big thanks to Kroger, Marlowe's Tavern, Georgia Farm Bureau, R.S. Andrews, all for making Chase for the Championship possible. We'll talk to you again next time.